All righty. Here we go. Another Buckeye Patriots podcast here in living color. And salute to everybody out there here tonight. Got to get a little bit of applause. It's just not the same without the applause and everything. All right, very good. So tonight, yes, applause from everywhere. I'm going to just show you who we got here tonight. Brian, you got a cast of in the Lobbyists for Citizens studio. Look at that. John Pleshnik, Leonard Gilbert, yourself. And I also have Jake and Sabrina out there in Licking County. And Jonathan, who's with us there in, Geauga County. That's right, Geauga County.
Yes,
okay, tonight, we're going to talk about COVID-19, for crying out loud. COVID-19. It's infectious. It's come back. It's attacking us. And I'm having nightmares already about it. The one thing we cannot do is shut down Ohio again, all right? That cannot happen under any circumstances. Now, Fauci, I was just reading, Fauci is upset. I don't know if Fauci is still with the government or not. He may have resigned, or I don't know if he resigned, took his big pension with him. But he was recommending that people, he's afraid. He was just on CNN, and he's afraid that people are not going to be masking up the way they're supposed to be masking up. I wonder why.
Do we still have to go 6 feet apart, Joe, or has that been moved to 10 feet now? Or?
The funny thing is, okay, it's 6 feet apart, and then it's you got to wear those phony masks that were proven. Fauci 2 years ago was saying the masks 2 years before COVID. Fauci was saying the masks are useless against a virus. COVID comes along, and all of a sudden it's like the lifesaver. It's the game changer and everything. But I want to play, guys, I want to play something for you here. Jake and Sabrina, you guys, where's Jake at? You guys had a little bit of problem with COVID-19. I get it. I understand. And
I mean, basically,
got 15,000 views in this. That's really impressive.
Up until COVID, I mean, it really was just like a simple place to work.
There's your restaurant, right?
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is threatening to close restaurants, bars, and the gyms, too, in response to the exploding COVID-19 epidemic in his state.
Governor Mike DeWine taking new steps to enforce the Dine Safe Ohio order.
We'll be going out and doing random checks to see how people are doing.
Okay, so there you go. So we got Governor DeWine everywhere doing everything that he's not supposed to be doing. So that's a video you guys put out. You got about 15,000 hits on it, which is really nice. And So let me hear a little bit about your story, okay? I mean, how much did that impact you guys? I think tremendously, right? The whole COVID-19?
Yeah. I mean, we had a restaurant in a small town in Granville, Ohio, and it's been in business for 60 years. We owned it for about 5 years. We bought it. We bought the business because Sabrina and I met at this restaurant. It's an ice cream and cheeseburger place.
Is that where you guys met? You met at that restaurant. Wow. That's
Sabrina
great.
worked there. She served me a cheeseburger, and basically it was over.
Wow.
So it's a great cheeseburger place. We bought it. We're just kind of, for that reason. We didn't buy it for to get rich or to whatever. It was because we liked the story. We met there. We bought it. We liked what it meant to the town. And we knew the owner that started it. That was, a guy that Sabrina, it was her first job. She worked for this guy named Ron. And to us, it was a big deal. Like, we loved it. We loved serving the community. Well, during COVID, during March of 2020, when Mike DeWine closed everything down, we shortly after, maybe about 2 weeks in, we just made a statement that, if you wanted to come in and dine, like normal, or if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, great. But we're not going to put dots all over our floor. We're not putting up the plexiglass. We're going to be a normal place.
Hey, can I ask you a question, Jake, on that, along those lines right there? So when did they come to you and say you have to put these dots on the floor? Because I noticed there were footprints everywhere you went. There were footprints, Were they mandating anything like that?
Well, it changed. It like at first it was you couldn't have indoor dining, and then that you didn't have to worry about masks at first, but it was just for takeout only. Was the original Dine Safe Ohio,
and it was only 2 weeks. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember that 2 weeks. That was it.
So it just kept changing, and Amy Acton would come on and be like, "We don't really know, and this might work, and this." And then they would change things, and they would and they would add to the order, and then they would say you have to put signs on your windows telling people how to behave. You have to put hand washing, hand sanitizer out, plastic, plexiglass up, and all this stuff. And we just said, hey, we believe people can handle their health the way they want to.
What a concept, huh? We're all big boys and girls. I think we can take care of ourselves, for crying out loud. We don't need to whine instead, and all those other crazy lunatics coming in and telling us what to do. And Amy Acton, oh my God. She only had 2 years of medical residency. So she graduated from medical school, she did 4 years of medical school, and then she did 2 years of residency. Usually you do 3 before you become a doctor. So you're just shadowing for those 2 years. But she was elevated to the highest state health position. Governor DeWine chose her out of everybody. And
by the way, Joe, I just have to point out that when she stepped down, they replaced her in the highest health position with a lawyer. Yes. Someone who didn't even have a medical degree. So when people said to me, John, how dare you comment on these orders? You're not a doctor. I said, the people making these decisions are all lawyers. I have the same academic background they do, so I'm qualified to say they're full of it.
Nice. Are you talking about Vanderhoff, or who are you talking about?
There are too many fake doctors for me to remember the name, but I remember the interim who came in right after Amy Acton was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Vanderhoff was the doctor that he looked to for the majority of the time, and he literally lives one street over from us. And so in our town, we had a village manager who put a mandate on top of Governor DeWine's mandate. And it was ludicrous. You guys, it was so crazy. We had been in the food industry for 5 years. I didn't really know much about the food industry, but what I did know is that you were not allowed to put your hands on your phone, near your nose, near your ears, near your mouth, and then touch your food, and cook food for customers. That you would get written up for that.
Who is watching you guys cook your food? Who's watching you cook your food that even know that you touched your mouth or something like that?
Well, the health department comes in and does a random inspection. And so, they're always looking for stuff like that. And then now all of a sudden they have you put a mask on. Did you know what everyone did with their masks? They were constantly doing this. I mean, we would go out and eat. We did not wear a mask ever. I'm sorry, we wore a mask twice, but that was to go to court to actually save children instead of walking around town with a mask on with all the rest of these idiots. Right. But it was absolutely horrible. And I know we're talking about this right now because they're talking about bringing it back. And Joe, I'm glad you're bringing it up because I cannot stress enough, whoever the viewers are right now, whoever is going to watch this in the future, if you do what you did the last time by masking up any of the commissioners, any of the leadership, anyone, you all are a part of what is going to be continuing to come. This controlling manipulation, tyranny that came in 2020 was so horrible. And not enough people are talking about it, and not enough people are saying we will never have that happen again. In fact, they voted for the a-hole who masked them all up.
Right.
And put him in there again.
They got DeWine back in. Husted, too. Let's not forget Husted. I don't know a lot about Husted, but I will say this. He was shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with this whole COVID-19 thing and locking down the state of Ohio. Let's not forget that. I mean, I want strong leadership, all right? I'm just not going to follow the leader. DeWine steps down. Okay, it's Husted's turn to take over. No. Not at all. And if you recall a couple of other things too, guys, and that is you were not allowed to go to funerals. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
You could go to Home Depot and buy yourself a shovel and dig a grave for somebody, I guess, but you couldn't go to a funeral. And churches were shut down. Churches and
they wouldn't even let you go to the. They wouldn't let you go to the hospitals when your a loved one was dying.
Right.
Many of them died alone.
Right. And the suicides went way up. Mental illness, we're still trying to get back to the jobs. I think we've only gotten we lost so many jobs, and now we finally somebody said we're 20 or 30,000 ahead to the COVID-19 era.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's everything is it's off the charts, crazy. So
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
I just don't want to see a
believe
return
that
to
it's.
it. Don't want to see a return to it.
Well, Joe,
Right.
it's got to be. It's got to be because of the election time. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, every 4 years we have a breakout of COVID. You're right, and it just happens that we have an election coming up.
It keeps getting worse. And this last time, I think 2020 was a trial run to see how many people would bow to, whatever it was that they were serving. So if people love to go on vacation, then they're going to mask up to get on a plane. If people love to go to Starbucks, they're going to mask up to go get their latte. And I mean, it was a big deal for Jake and I. Not only were we trying to save our business because we had hundreds of calls to police. We had the police that came in and they were trying to write us up and shut us down. Our village manager, we had the health department, we had OSHA. OSHA was being called on us. We had customers coming in and literally taking their
You got to be kidding me. But yours is a small restaurant, right? It's just a small restaurant. I would think. You have OSHA coming in? I'm surprised,
It was absolutely
Amy Acton
ridiculous.
didn't come in.
I'm sure they would have loved to have sent any of them people. But the thing is there's only a few people bold enough to step through my door. And the village manager was bold enough until I did a documentary about him. Once I did a documentary about him, he never speaks to me again. But you know what he does do? He flips me off when I go through town. We have a leader in our town.
If they're flipping you off, you're doing something right. You're doing something right, without a doubt.
You're over target, Sabrina. You're over target.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, you remember the COVID years? They weren't that long ago. They're coming back.
I absolutely do. And I brought something up to share it with you. So this, I've been sharing around. People are talking about it and concerned about it and everything. I love this. So for me, one of the keys with these recurring elements is to have some sort of snippet. I'm going to read this to you. It's brief. If you are reading all the posts about mandates coming back, obsessing about it, feeling stuck in anger, fear, or worry, frozen and disassociated, you are helping to co-create the reality they want. And that's exactly where they want you to be. If you are reading this and posts about it and mandates coming back, quote unquote, moving through the fear and anger that arises regarding their authority as a joke, laughing about it, thinking that's not going to happen in my reality, while aligning your thoughts, feelings, and taking deliberate action towards the world you want, that's exactly where they don't want you to be. It's a spectacular post. I grabbed it as a screenshot. I've been putting that everywhere. That's my mentality. And I hope more people adopt it. I mean, it was ludicrous the first time. Everyone was trying to navigate it because it was the first glimmers of communism in America. We didn't know what to do with it. Now we know what to do with it. And anybody that's going to mask up and start talking about you need to have jabs again and 6 feet or whatever. One other element, and this actually just occurred to me as you were speaking. You were talking about this. Maybe this is going to be the new thing or something like it every 4 years. And my mind went back to that pivotal moment when Candace Owens in D.C. spoke to, I think it was a Senate hearing, talking about all the promises the Black community and the suddenly racism is a big issue in America. And she nailed it in that speech. All this stuff resurfaces every 4 years as a manipulative, controlling tool to try to get votes. It's nasty stuff. And I think, connecting the two, and my reason for thinking about it and bringing it up, I think I'm going to create a post on this later. I think that there's a lot of concern now about the left narrative, Democrat left, whatever you want to call them, losing their quote-unquote black vote. By the way, as a side note, I think that's ludicrous in and of itself. We're all free, individual thinking people. The idea that your gender or race or ethnic background or skin pigment controls how you vote, that's leftist nonsense. But tying those together, I think that what we have is this recurring 4-year cycle of people who want to try to manipulate people, coming up with things like fear to try to extract votes from people. The upshot is, don't let it happen. Take that power away from them and just ignore them and laugh in their face.
Yeah, we got to definitely do that. I'm going to just shift it over to you there for a minute there, Brian. And I don't know if John Poleshnik has something he wanted to say about COVID-19 or Leonard. You guys remember the good old days, right? I mean, COVID-19, and it's coming to an area near you.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to add to bring some reality to this discussion is that we have to remember three things that are going on in our country. Number one, we're an ungodly society. Number two, we're an uneducated society. You can thank the public education system for that. And the third is that the church is theologically bankrupt right now. So we got a vicious combination on our hands. And so it's not that these type of things are ripe for Marxist movements to take place. And it didn't just start yesterday. This has just been a slow deterioration of our country over time. And we may have to get a good butt whooping to get us to wake up. And it's unfortunate, but the church, in my mind, if the church falls apart, then there's nothing left holding the moral base for the country. It's just anything goes at that point.
I couldn't agree more with Leonard, but I want to put a particular focus here because this past Thursday was International Opioid Overdose Awareness Day. And I went across the county to different ceremonies, tree plantings, because the idea is planting a tree is optimism for the future. But the numbers are just through the roof on suicides and overdoses. And it's not just the open border with China that the big guy and his son Hunter sold out. It's not just the drug problem. It's the fact that isolation and mental health issues, frankly, they expand the drug problem to heights we've never seen before. And a lot of the language of the communist left in COVID-19 was, you need to care about others. You need to stop being so selfish. When in reality, the lockdowns were the height of selfishness. They were people being told, you might be a little bit healthier, a little bit safer if you sacrifice the education of your children, the mental health of those who are most at risk, and frankly, shut down law enforcement so that we don't protect the most vulnerable, those who are being abused, attacked, hurt in their family and daily lives. We're taking all protection away from the most vulnerable in society so that you might be a little bit healthier. Now, in reality, the lockdown didn't make anyone safer or healthier. We all know that now. It's well past the point of debate. Anyone who says the lockdowns had any health benefit is smoking crack, and their name is Hunter Biden. But the bottom line is, it not just was totally and utterly unhelpful, it did enormous mental damage to our children, to those who are already on the edge mentally, and those who are dealing with abuse and drug addiction and alcohol issues. We destroyed those people. And I have not heard one apology, not one tear down the cheek of any of these government officials who sacrificed our children and those most at risk in society. And that fundamental selfishness, where we all stood back and allowed this bullying, mass shaming, lockdowns, that is unchristian by definition. It is satanic. And the next time someone talks about a lockdown, say, stop being so selfish. Stop only worrying about your health. What about everyone else's?
Yeah, I know. I agree with that tremendously, because that was one of the things. That was one of the issues I had too. And people would say, "Well, I have a problem. I have a problem. I could get sick from COVID, so I need everybody wearing masks, to keep me from getting it or whatever." Which was kind of ridiculous. We're not going to comply. We're not going to comply. We're not going to comply. But,
hey, Joe.
Speaking of, one second, I want to get something from Leonard here for a minute. Leonard, what about the churches, man? I know I was with the Catholic Church. They just folded like a cheap suit.
Yes.
And I know cheap suits when I see them, okay? And I own them. That's all I own. But they did nothing. They did nothing. So what's your take on that? What was the reasoning behind that?
Again, see, now, this is something that I've seen in a lot of churches now. We've gotten to a point where pietism now is more important than the actual application of the gospel. So what I mean by that is that, we can quote Latin and Greek and all this other stuff, and we talk about salvation, but now the question is, now what do I do with it? So we have created this sphere within the church where it's all internalized, and it doesn't go out any further than that. And I can tell you, like I said, a lot of churches, they didn't have to shut down. They just willingly said, hey, we just better go with the flow. So to me, we're supposed to be influencing society, but now society is influencing the church. So it's all messed up. It just needs a reformation. We don't need a revival. We need a reformation.
To your point, Leonard, the Bible teaches faith without works is dead. And there's so much debate theologically over what it means. I think it's really simple.
Yes.
It's not that you can buy your way into heaven by doing good works. That's not what the Bible is teaching. However, if you're a good person, if you're following the gospel and you're trying your best, you will inevitably do good works as a result of that. It's not that the good works buy your way into heaven. It's that if you are a good Christian, you will inevitably do good works. You can't turn on a flashlight without light coming out of it. You cannot be a good Christian without doing good works. And so you know a tree by its fruit. If there are no good works, if there's no good fruit, there's something wrong with the tree.
Yep, there you
100%,
go. And you don't 100%. Put your light under a bushel basket either. That's what Jesus said. Don't put it under a bushel basket.
One of the things, bad theology leads to bad lifeology. It's that simple.
Gotcha. Hey, I want to say one thing real quick here. We're live streaming, and I have the Rumble and the YouTube chat up. So if anybody watching on Rumble or watching on YouTube wants to put something into the chat room, I can see it, and we will comment on it, okay? So I really ask that you
I like that.
that you do that, because I'd like to get some input here tonight. So
speaking of which,
and also one last thing I do want to say, because I always forget to say this, but hit the follow button on Rumble. Hit the follow button on Rumble and hit the subscribe button on YouTube, okay? So we start growing some numbers here. But if you're in the chat room, please post something, and we'll talk about it.
All right. So thank you for that. My wife is texting me to ask me to put in a plug for this Saturday. Speaking of education, there's an organization called Fortify Geauga is hosting a Meet the Candidates for school board candidates. I hope that everybody, every county, everywhere, and every local district is taking advantage of this opportunity between now and November elections to seek out and find good school board candidates. It's mission critical. You've heard me talk about that in the past. But I wanted to interject a few things on, I've mentioned it in the past. Go to fortifygeauga.org, and you're going to see some information on that event. But if you're not in Geauga County, grab the idea for that and create something near you where you live. But a few things, the damage done from COVID-19, and I like to say that we're on like COVID-27 now or something. All these little trickling iterations are annoying. But there's more than just what we talked about. I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but there were massive lung issues in children, upper respiratory infections. And one of the key takeaways that I don't want us to ever lose sight of is this is the first generation in human history where we have sacrificed the health of the youth to try to benefit the health of the elderly. The youth were never at risk. But this idea, we had children out in schools trying to compete on athletic fields and run races and everything with these masks on, and they're supposed to learn how to play instruments like wind instruments with masks on and these bubbles and everything. It was actually harming them physically, and we knowingly allowed it to happen. And the pretense of the whole thing was that they were going to save grandma and grandpa. We cannot let that happen again. We need to be strong and assertive in our messaging to the people around us. I think that a lot of us who fought back and just didn't mask last time were sort of complacent and allowed people like, well, it's their kid. I'm just going to play nice, go along to get along. We can't let that happen again. It's time for us to get really vocal. That's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Yeah,
and speaking of getting vocal, I want to jump in here because there's an event going on this Saturday in Lake County that I want to invite everyone to attend. we're actually having our third annual Judeo-Christian Patriotic Rally in Painesville Square from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's hosted by the Heritage Club of Northeast Ohio, and fun fact, Leonard is actually the past president. Hal Werner, former Painesville councilman, took over after Leonard, and he has done a great job of stewarding our club. But the Heritage Club has been a major conservative group in Lake County. We bring together Bible-believing churches, conservative elected officials, pastors, ministers, and choirs, and we come together to talk about the founding of the country and how we need to save it from the biblical perspective. So very grateful to Leonard and to Hal Werner after him for husbanding the Heritage Club. But 11 to 4 p.m., this Saturday, Painesville Square, we want to invite everyone in the Tri-County area and beyond. This is an important rally, and it gets bigger every time.
Thank you, John.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks.
I do have a question for Jonathan, if I may, and that is one thing that I heard is that many of the older children that had grandchildren, they would not let their parents see the children if the parents were not vaccinated, which I found very, very harsh. So what's the message that we have to get across to these, the older children with grandchildren that's not appropriate? That hurts everybody, not only the children, but the grandparents also.
Look, I think the answer is simple. Words have meaning until the left gets a hold of them and manipulates things and destroys the meaning of words. This is a pen, and everyone agrees that this is a pen. Until mid-2021, we all agreed on a definition of the word vaccine. And then the left doing what they continue to do threw sand in the gas tank by redefining vaccine. And everyone who's paying attention, hopefully by now we're in the 90% plus of people that understand globally that the quote-unquote vaccine was some new thing that doesn't actually do anything. It's that there's no benefit. At best, it's now a pharmaceutical. It's an ameliorant, which means that it reduces symptoms. And you know what? The idea that, and I'm sorry, we're into the weeds a little bit, but this COVID thing is a nightmare, and I think it's a nightmare by design. But in my medicine cabinet somewhere, I got Tylenol. You know what Tylenol is according to the new definition? It's a vaccine, because in 2021 they changed it to something taken orally, a surface like an ointment or something injected that reduces symptoms. Okay, if I have COVID, you know what my risks are? It's statistical zero that I'm going to die from COVID. It's actually now probably statistically close to 100% that I might someday die with COVID. But what the left have done is playing Jedi mind tricks on some people, and the people who are not realizing that need to be confronted in a friendly, courteous way. But I think they need to be continued to be shown the evidence over and over again. And I think maybe there's something to it, like advertising. They say in advertising it takes 7 touches before somebody grasps a new concept or new product. 7 times.
That's funny because Pfizer and Joe Biden say it takes 7 vaccines before it works.
Yeah. But define works. Have we read? Does works even mean anything anymore? It works to make them rich.
All right, so we got
Jonathan.
somebody chatting in here. Can the commissioners issue any proclamation against requiring the use of masks? Do you guys have any kind of power like that, John, or what is the is there a power struggle? If the governor says something, are you allowed to say no, or what?
So, first of all, there's a very big difference between counties on the one hand, cities, villages, and townships on the other, because there's home rule for municipalities, and they have rights under the Ohio Constitution that the state government cannot infringe upon. County government, as a matter of law, is simply an arm of state government. And so there's no way we can substantively disagree with the governor. For example, when the new holiday Juneteenth was declared, our county prosecutor did not want to go forward with it, particularly because it would interrupt courts and court cases. But ultimately, we had no choice, because when the governor makes a decision, it's binding on the counties. That doesn't mean that commissioners and prosecutors and recorders can't make a statement. And commissioners, just like city council people, or frankly your local Lions Club, can pass a non-binding resolution issuing any statement they want. And I'm not minimizing that. I think making a statement can be very important. Sometimes the bully pulpit is all you have, and speaking as loudly as you can is the biggest difference you can make. And we have made statements in the past. For example, we passed a resolution in support of the Second Amendment 2 years ago for the Lake County Commissioners. So we can make a statement, but substantively, we have no legal grounds to actually disagree or ignore an order from state government.
Aren't you also directed by the Lake County Board of Health?
Well, I wouldn't say we're directed, but health decisions are in the jurisdiction of the Lake County General Health District. And this is an important point. I don't think anyone knew what a health district was until COVID in Ohio. Yep. And I had lots of residents calling me saying, I disagree with the health district's decision here or there. And I had to say, well, the county commissioners do not have supervisory authority over the health commissioner. In fact, he's governed by the health board, which is in turn appointed by the different municipalities in the county. And that's not passing the buck, but I believe that voters and residents deserve to know who's actually making the decision. Because these health districts have been operating almost anonymously for decades. No one knew who appointed them, where they came from. And so you need to know that your health district is functionally run by your cities, your villages, your townships. And so if you think they're going off the walls, you need to call your mayor, your township trustee, you need to call your city council person, because those are the folks who appoint them.
Yeah, in other words,
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a real good point. You got to start calling people. You got to start making things happen. I'll give you guys the last word here before we move on. But what's your last word? Go ahead. I want to hear.
I just want to make 3 points. Jonathan and Brian, I'll just tell you flat out what your question was about the parents. We have some really bad parents right now. They're bad, and there is a place for them. Number 2, the messaging that needs to go across to these parents and also to the church is Revelations 21:8. I've been telling people this, that they need to read this because this is biblical. Revelations 21:8, it talks about the second death, which means going to hell. Okay? Do you know the first group of people in Revelations 28 that Jesus talks about going to hell? Do you guys want to take a guess?
No, I have no idea. I have no idea.
The first group of people, Revelations 21:8. Get this in your brain, and it doesn't have to be with my tone. It can be in a very loving manner. But the very first group of people that will be going into the lake of fire is the cowards. The cowards are the very first people in Revelations 28, and that's what we have right now. Is we have a bunch of cowards and fearful people that need to wake up, or they are going to hell. I didn't say that. The Word of God says that, and we have a really lost group of people right now that are not spreading the message of the gospel. They're spreading this good news, prosperity, Satan BS, and it's absolutely unacceptable. We really need to let people know you cannot be walking in fear. Faith and fear do not happen in the same place. If you believe in Jesus and what he says, he came to heal. He came to set people free. He came to set the captives free. And if you're harming children, there's a special place for you also. That's in the New Testament 4 times what will happen to you if you harm a child. And I also want to say to John, well done on what you just said about what is happening with the opioid crisis, the drugs, the abuse. Yes. Because if you go to I went to 3 of our health department pages, and they have colorful, amazing statistics about COVID and how many people got COVID and all these statistics about where to go and how to get the help. You know what they have for the drug issue, the opioid crisis that's going on right now? About this much information that you have to dig for to find a report, and it's a backdated report because they're not even keeping up on the suicides, the drug overdoses, the fentanyl that is going through Ohio right now. And I'm so tired of hearing about the border, because I agree with you, John. This is not just coming from the border. This is happening in Ohio underneath Governor DeWine and underneath our leaders right now who are a part of this. And we need to stand up and say, warning, 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 you guys. This is a problem. COVID was not a problem. fentanyl and drugs and suicide and our children being harmed are a problem. So John, thank you for what you said. That means a lot to me about how you spoke and what you said about what was going on, because I think it was August 30th or 31st is the awareness day, right? And you didn't hear anything about that. Nothing.
No.
Hey, and by the way,
go ahead.
I would just, well, we know John laid out the results of masking, like what the folks that are really, it just affects them the worst are the addicts. It's some low income family, these kids that probably didn't learn how to read during distance learning, these children that were doing distance learning during lockdowns. And so when you go into a business in the next week or month or whenever it really hits the fan and they say you can't come in and buy whatever you want to be there to buy, or you can't dine here without wearing a mask, you need to turn around and leave.
Yeah.
We need to turn around and leave.
Don't go.
Don't go to Menards because, they're requiring masks and they have the cheapest doors or windows or whatever you need. You need to go down the road to somebody who respects your freedom and their employees' freedom, because we know what happens when we start to comply, because it started at Menards. It started at some retailers that offered great deals and people put them on and people did it, and we can't do it again.
Yeah, we have to send a really clear message, and it's not probably that these kids can't read. There are 4th and 5th graders right now who got passed through the system during cannot read, and you have DeWine's wife who talks about a reading program and is so passionate about readers, and she has 4th and 5th graders underneath her governor time that cannot read, and also she won't pull these pornography books out of these libraries. So I know I get really passionate, you guys, but it's because we're in this fight. We're so frustrated. So Revelations 21:8 is what you need to tell these mamas and these parents that we're going out and teaching and preaching the gospel.
21:8. I'm going to read it to
Joe,
you. Wait. I got to read it. I just happened to pull it up.
Okay.
All right. So 21:8, Revelation, it says, well, prior to that, Jesus talked about the victor inheriting all these gifts and, of course, heaven. But then 8, verse 8 says, but as for cowards, and you're right, it's the very first thing he mentions, cowards, the unfaithful, the depraved, murderers, the unchaste, sorcerers, idol worshippers, sounds like the Democrats, deceivers of every sort. Their lot is the burning pool of sulfur, which is the second death. There you go.
The second death, the coward. There's no place in heaven for cowards.
No place for, God doesn't want any cowards. All right, guys, we're going to move on. We're going to get to a really interesting subject. Property taxes. Stop
paying them.
All right, so here we go. Buckeye Patriots Podcast one more time. All right, again, if you're in the chat room, chat. We want to hear you. And I can actually see it now. So it's the high technology we have. Well, let's get into the property taxes. We got some experts and some gurus. So I'm going to be shifting it over here to you guys in the studio. Brian, Leonard, John.
Yeah.
What say you?
Yes, we are here to talk about property taxes. I've been this has sort of been an issue that I've been following for more than 5 years, and it all started when I looked at my own property taxes, and I came up with the statement that if we ever stay on this ever increasing property taxes, we're going to price seniors and those living on fixed income out of their homes. And I was right on, 6-7 years ago, because we're seeing that now today. I was out at a wedding celebration, 50 years. People were coming up to me and said, Brian, you're right about the property taxes. I can't afford it anymore. So Leonard and I spent some time. We said, we've got to do something. We're not sure exactly what we can do, but we want to take a look at property taxes from a biblical viewpoint. Leonard's the leader on the
so in other words, what God says about it. What God says, right?
What does God say?
What does God say about property taxes?
Well, first of all, we got to get one thing straight. God owns everything. He owns the land as well. The state does not own the land. That has to be made clear. Secondly,
Amen.
if you are in your house, well, let's start with renting first. Let's say, for instance, you're renting an apartment and you don't pay your rent. Then what happens? You get evicted, right? Now, you've been in your house for 30 years, got the mortgage paid off, and then what happens if you don't pay your property tax? Guess what? You can get evicted. So that's not ownership. That's called renting and leasing from the state. So in a nutshell, what happens is that you're basically, the state is controlling you. So the nice thing about owning something is that a poor man can work himself out of poverty if he can own something. So as long as we are leasing from the state, then you're basically pretty much going to run people out of their homes. Now, and Brian had talked about this whole concept about the fixed income. A lot of people keep telling me, oh, Leonard, well, you got to look at the Homestead Act and all this other stuff. And I said, well, tell me when the Homestead Act has stopped taxes from going up. It didn't happen. So inevitably, this is going to come to a crash. The second thing is the taxes are being used for public education. Now, there's nowhere in Scripture where we can show me where the state is responsible for education. You are responsible, the parents are responsible for their child's education. Now, so to me, that's what you call theft. And people will say, well, Leonard, we voted on that. Well, I didn't. And even if we did vote on it, that doesn't make it right. You still have to look at it from what's right and what's wrong. We're not in a situation where we're talking about Republican versus Democrat and all this kind of stuff. This is good versus evil. And as long as people can have control over you, the thing like COVID and masking and all this, it just keeps snowballing. Now, what I was trying to do was at least start somewhere. To say, look, if we could make a dent somewhere, that would at least get the ball rolling to start educating people. Because one of the things that we have right now, like I said, we're just an uneducated society. I can tell you right now, let's talk about Social Security for just an instance. People will die if you try to take that away. They'll say, you can't do that, you can't do that. We're entitled to that. Well, guess what? No country in the history of the world has printed itself into prosperity. Just because we're the U.S., don't think it can't happen here. So in other words, as my friend would say, it's going to fold like a cheap suit. The education system.
Hey! No, not for my wardrobe already. Okay.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I actually had that one too, so I just kept it to myself. But anyway, so even the public school system, if you look at it, it's an indoctrination chamber.
It's become that. It's absolutely become that, without a doubt.
Yes. And so now what happens is if you start indoctrinating a generation, over time, the abnormal becomes normal. And that's what we have right now. And so now this whole thing has to be turned the other way, but you can't do it overnight. It's going to have to start in small sections and in small areas. I'm one of these guys that thinks that politics is local. So it has to start from the local and it has to expand out. So now I can deal with the local because I can talk to Mr. Plesnick. I can talk to my neighbors. I can talk to them. So this is where I say people have to realize you can't take on City Hall trying to take on a monster. You got to start at the very core of it and start working on the root to knock it down. So
all right. Well, wait a minute. Let me jump in here for a minute because I mean this all sounds really nice. Brian, what are you guys going to specifically do? Do you have a plan?
Yes, it's very simple.
What is it?
All I'm saying, here's what I'm trying to tell, and I was talking to John Plesnick about this. Okay, here's the bottom line. I have no problem paying taxes for services rendered to me, okay? So all I'm saying is that you take that, give me the tax bill, tell me what I owe, but don't tie it to my house. That house is mine. And all we're saying is like, give me true ownership of my home, and when I reach the age of 65, I'm done. That's it. So now, if you just send me the tax bill, I pay it, and you can also get to a point where you can make it a flat tax, which God also advocates in the Bible. None of this consumption stuff. I only have a certain amount of income, so you can only tax me so much. You can't tax me for what I don't have. So it's not really that complicated. God really made it simple. All we have to do is just execute.
Well, I'm questioning whether or not at what point in time should a senior stop paying property taxes for school. If we're paying 60 to 65% of our annual property taxes for schools, we've never had children, using the public education. Why are we continuing to pay for those schools? And if you look at what the results, the proficiency scores that are coming out of the schools, it is an abomination that some of these children, when they graduate from high school, they can't read or write. Even in my Riverside School District, they're celebrating that they were ranked in the nation with a 68.8% out of 100, and they're crowing about that. And quite frankly, my parents never sent me to school to be average. So I can give you all sorts of statistics about math and reading. I'll just tell you, there is something going on in all of the public schools and math education. When I look at the numbers in Lake County, when you have in some schools in 12th grade, if they've got 11% or 15% proficiency in algebra or geometry, I'm saying that's not an anomaly, though, in the schools.
But Brian, maybe the scores really aren't that bad. Maybe the person who wrote up these sheets just didn't learn math.
Well, that's very true, but overall...
Yeah, if nobody knows math, how do you know the percentages right? John, hey, there's a quick question here, and then I'll get back to you, Brian. Okay. Real quick, county commissioners, can you guys do anything about property taxes? Somebody wants to know that.
So let me jump in. Number one, Lake County, like any county, is entitled to 2.1 mils under state law of property tax. And I'm proud that even though we can collect that much, even though state law gives us that right with no vote of the people, it's just built into the state formula, we collect less than half that. So voluntarily, Lake County collects less than half the property tax that it's entitled to. That said, it's a tiny drop in the bucket because, as Brian said, 60 to 80% of your typical property tax bill in Ohio goes to the school districts. So if you want to go local, as Leonard said, the local authorities who actually are voting on the vast majority of your property tax are your school board members. Mm-hmm. These positions are much, much more important than anyone has acknowledged, at least up till now. They are in control of the vast majority of your property tax bill. So if you want a local solution, you have to go to the school board and say, you can't tax this much, and what you do tax has to be spent well, because 15% proficiency in math, you may as well burn the money. The children will learn as much. Yeah. That said, what are the incremental steps that we can take in a broader point? And I do want to jump in and say this because it's a proposal that I've made more than once. I remember at Senior Day at the Lake County Fair, we had a state rep get up, and as Leonard suggested, he started bragging about the homestead exemption and how he tweaked it so it was just a little bit higher than it was before. And, you could hear everyone's, like, let's get back to bingo. And I was introduced right after the state rep, and I said, listen, I acknowledge as a county commissioner, we have no authority to change state law. That falls to the state house, the state senate, the governor. But what we need, what should be, is a 100% property tax exemption for seniors. When you turn 65 after having paid for the system your entire life, at least at that point, we cut you free. Now, Leonard makes strong arguments for why it should be done earlier, and perhaps there should be exemptions for personal residences for everyone. That's a very ambitious goal. Right. But at the minimum, the starting point is to say, when you turn 65, you've paid enough. And frankly, you have folks who have kids in public school that pay nothing for their kids to attend. Right. It is so unfair to tell a senior, we're going to tax you out of your house, but this wealthy couple with 2 doctors isn't paying a dime towards their kids' education. That's not fair. You need to make sure that the people who are benefiting are actually taking on the burden, and seniors have already paid their taxes long enough. There should be a 100% property tax exemption for seniors.
Okay, I want to just jump in here a second because I agree with you 100%. That makes so much sense to the world. They don't have kids anymore in the public system. and all the property tax, everything, you've gone through 65 years, whatever. That makes a lot of sense. Now, right now, we've got the voucher program in Ohio that almost everybody can get some money if they want to go to a private school. And then we also have the ability to homeschool. And I'm going to bring you guys on for a minute just to get a perspective here, because you did homeschool. So let's hear that perspective as well, because I think that worked out pretty well for you, right? The homeschooling?
Yes.
Yeah, homeschooling is amazing. And yeah, where we live, the property taxes are so high here. And we have a blue ribbon school. But you know what they're teaching the kids here? About the whole freaking pride movement. I mean, we have pride parades. We have a track coach who is married to a male, apparently, and he takes his kids to drag shows. We have just a mass amount of people or kids who are undereducated in a blue ribbon school, and we are paying for some education that they're not getting. We are doing the education at home with our kids, and our kids are amazing.
Yeah, it's an indoctrination camp, basically. The blue ribbon really is, it's ironic that it's the color blue, because I feel like it's the Democrat thought process of the liberal agenda they're pushing there. So I feel like even their mascot of calling it the blue ribbon, or the name of, their made up participation trophy that they give themselves, which I think that's driven by the realtors and that want to sell property in this town. They sell, to these rich folk that are going to be moving here for Intel. Hey, come move to Granville because it's a blue ribbon school. That's the realtors marketing. But really, it's not that much of a good education. And so we knew that. I went to Granville. I knew it wasn't that great of a school, so we've just homeschooled, because number one, you have the ability to teach your kids what you need to teach them for your business. We feel like we're raising entrepreneurs. We're raising the next generation. They're going to take over our businesses, and they need to know how to work in this world. So we don't want the public to handle that. We felt like it was our job to train our kids. And
gotcha.
We've got 2 that have graduated, and they're pretty smart. So far, so good. We're going to stick with it.
I would say also, if you're homeschooling your kids, I mean, why should your property tax be going to the public school? Right. And if you don't have kids in the school system anymore, maybe that's another reason too, right?
Well, you know what they did here in Granville, Joe, is they passed another school levy. Well, the first school levy failed, okay? So, and mostly because the older generation are tired of paying the taxes here. And so they were like, we're not doing this anymore. So it failed. They put it back on the ballot and revamped some stuff. And so it passed. And you know what they did as soon as it passed? They gave administration a raise in the school district. They gave the athletic director a raise, the administration a raise. They don't even need a raise. They're making way too much money anyway. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Way too much money.
Kids.
Well, way too much money, and they have a great pension and everything else like that. Jonathan, I want to get you in here for a minute if you'd like to chime in. I'm trying to.
I would like to chime in.
Go ahead.
Anybody that's new to this podcast, you may not know, I am a chair and territory lead of an organization called Protect Ohio Children. We're a statewide organization. I run North Ohio, which is about 204 school districts from roughly Mansfield north. And I am intimately familiar with these issues. I'm also co-creator with a Columbus area lawyer by the name of Omar Tarazi, great conservative lawyer. We created something called the Academic Accountability Project. First of all, Brian Massey is doing extraordinary work to pull out and document the lack of education that's taking place in these schools. But also hit Protect Ohio Children. There's a drop-down list. Take a look at the Academic Accountability Project and pull up reports for your district. There's a walkthrough video to update. You can extract the actual numbers, the academics that are happening in your school in lots of different ways. That's a starting point. But let's talk about what's really happening in these schools. We're still in the habit of calling them public schools. I actually had a conversation years ago with Alex Newman. He writes for Epic Times. You may know his name. great conversation, and I heard him use the term government schools. And I thought, well, that's sort of inflammatory. I mean, they're public schools. Come on. I've spent years now involved in this stuff, and I've adopted that as well. If it were public schools, the people there would listen to us. We're the public. They don't. They don't listen to us. They listen to government. Therefore, they're government schools. But take a look at this, Ohio. Ohio, for a long time, was a top 10 destination for education in the country. We've now dropped to 34th. At the same time, Ohio has softened academic proficiency standards, which means that whatever rating you're looking at, it's sort of squishy and gets softer, it seems, every few years. It incorporates all sorts of goofy nonsense that doesn't have to do with academic proficiency, but it actually gets worse. During the same time that Ohio has dropped its standards and dropped from a top 10 destination to 34th in the nation, our country has fallen to roughly dead last internationally. But at the same time, our cost per pupil has gone up in staggering sums. We have a school district not far from me in Northeast Ohio here, where the cost peaked out above $32,000 per student per year. And that doesn't even include the extra layer of what's called the, I just drew a blank on the name, the Educational Service Center. Educational Service Center is another fee. So let's just round down and say $30,000 a year. And that school district is striving for, drumroll please, barely literate. Mathematically incompetent and barely literate. That's the result we're getting. So when we talk about all this stuff that's happening in schools and whether or not we should pay taxes up until a certain date, I love those ideas. But let's start with being realistic. The first thing we need to do is look at the expenses. The number of administrators has far outstripped the compensation for competent, skilled teachers. There are a lot of great teachers out there, and they're underrepresented, and they're over-manipulated, and they're stressed, and teacher burnout is real. Put some of that money into where it's actually beneficial, which is good teaching. Get rid of huge numbers of these administrators with their high salaries and the nonsense that they're pumping into the schools.
Well,
there's a lot
the indoctrination and all those high salaries. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
I have to say a resounding amen to that, Jonathan. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If we fire half the administrators and we pay the other half as much, we'll still have too many overpaid administrators. And we talked a little bit about homeschooling. I think it's worth noting that Leonard actually homeschooled his children, and I came from a family of 7. All of us were homeschooled from cradle to college, and I'm proud to say I graduated from college when I was 19 years old, started 15, graduated at 19, perfect 4.0 GPA, co-valedictorian with my sister, went to Duke University School of Law, graduated at 22, was making 6 figures in Wall Street. And I went to school at night while I was there for a Master of Laws in Taxation from the #1 ranked graduate tax program in the country at NYU. That's what a little homeschool kid from a small town in North Carolina can do. Homeschooling has incredible potential if the parents are prepared for that responsibility. Not all parents are teachers, not all parents are capable of homeschooling, but it's a wonderful option for a lot of families, and those families should be supported too. Yes. We didn't have any tax dollars coming our way. Everything was paid for by our family. Yep, we had to pay the property taxes that everybody else did, but nothing came back to our family or Leonard's, and that's not fair.
Now,
and the property taxes were a lot less. I mean, they just keep going up and up and up. There's like no end to them in sight. But go ahead, Leonard.
But I do want to make sure we understand one thing, and God has made this very clear in His Word. You have a biblical responsibility to teach your children. The state does not have that responsibility. You can go back and look in history how the whole educational system started in our country, and it was based on a Protestant work ethic. Now, all I'm saying is that if you look at God's word and how He performs in history, if you do not do what He's commanded you to do, there's going to be consequences. So my contention is that that system as we know it today is going to fold. It's just going to be a matter of time. And all we're doing is sending the children right into hell. That's all you're doing. Now, I'm not saying that every child's going to come out bad, but don't be surprised when your child comes home to say, "You're not the boss of me."
Yeah, your child comes home, and you could send your child to school as Ralph, and he can come back as Nancy, and you just have no say in the matter anymore. It's just that it's absolutely that crazy.
Joe, another comment?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I applaud John Plechnik's comments about home education. And Leonard, kudos to you for taking that initiative to educate your children properly. But I want to dissuade anybody from whatever intimidation might hit when you think about home education. There are so many resources out there that are just below the surface, and they're probably barely visible. If you're watching this podcast live or in a replay, and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh my gosh, that seems scary. I got all those hours, and how would I educate?" The resources that are available to you, especially in the state of Ohio, are extraordinary. There are micro schools, there are community schools, there are pods, there are co-ops. There are so many resources, and I'm telling you, there are people out there that are hungry for you. They want you to call them or hit them up on social media, because they will lavish attention on you. They will talk about curriculum and what they're doing, and you'll get their kids together. And by the way, forget about the nonsense about your kids won't be socialized. Your kids will have a better social life, especially in this next upcoming COVID 27.
Yeah.
The social life is extraordinary. Families get together all the time. They tend to be like-minded. You're going to find all kinds of great families, Judeo-Christian, conservative, across the board. You name it. The resources are there. Just start looking, and you're going to find great stuff.
Yeah, you shouldn't be intimidated if you want to homeschool, I don't think. But, hey, just a last point here, Brian. I mean, you have some statistics on how bad the schools have been. Do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, we read that Governor DeWine said that they need to do something about the reading scores, because 60% of the children at the third grade level were not proficient in reading. And what we have been told, that is a standard that the educational system uses, that if a child has problems at the third grade level, he or she will continue to have problems throughout their school career. So that's extremely important. And I can bore everybody with all sorts of statistics, but I guess the message I want to make is, for people out there, please get educated. It's not important to be entertained. You need to be educated on what is happening to the children, because this truly is our future, and what is happening to them is it's just not acceptable. As a taxpayer paying a lot of money to the Riverside School, I'm going to hold them accountable. I will meet with their principal and say, here are the results of the current proficiency scores, and when I see math that's under 50% proficiency, there is a basic problem. And I go to school boards and I say that, but I never get any responses from the school boards. And then when I go to a mentor school and I see that they're allowing obscene or pornographic books in the school, that's not acceptable. But what I'm finding out is that no one, from the local prosecutors, from the police departments, from the superintendents, no one is worried about violating the Ohio Revised Code 2907321 of pandering obscenity to minors.
Absolutely right. Yeah,
so that we need to get educated. And please get educated.
Get active, get out there, get moving with it. Leonard, do you have a closing comment? Go ahead, if you'd like.
Yeah, one of the things, I go back to the church again. Again, the church was on the forefront of the whole educational system that we started, and it got hijacked. And I was talking to Brian a little bit about the Enlightenment period, and now what has happened with the Enlightenment period has been very destructive, more than what people realize. When you talk about the Enlightenment period, prior to that, you talk about the Puritan era and the Reformation period, the focus was centered on God. Soon as the Enlightenment period hit, now it went from God to man. And when you put that in there, you're done. It's a kiss of death. Because if man is naturally bad, the biggest lie that's ever been told to mankind is that man is naturally good. Man is naturally bad. And he doesn't know. Bad. Thank you. And if you don't understand that, then guess what? You got to start all the way back in Genesis. Don't even worry about Revelation. Go back to Genesis and start over again.
Right, so, you said it. It's just, yep. We're in denial if we think otherwise. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yes.
So my closing remarks are these. When you're looking at the rich and the powerful, don't do as they say. Do as they do. And here's what I mean. Look at COVID. Look at education. Pick your topic. In COVID, you'd find Nancy Pelosi hanging out without a mask at her favorite restaurant. You'd see all the governors who are locking people down going on vacation. We'd catch them on camera and they'd go, whoops. Because they knew darn well that there was no significant health risk beyond a typical cold. They knew. I mean, if there was a real plague going around, they'd all be in a bunker and they'd, wave to us from their camera and say, good luck, folks, and then half of us would die. The reality is they continued with their lives as normal because they had the inside information. They knew that there was no significant health risk to them. They just wanted everyone else to live by a different set of rules. For education, the most liberal Democrats, they raise their kids and educate their kids like a conservative Republican. They're making sure that if the public schools are bad, with all the money they've stolen from us, they send their kids to private school, the best in the business. Barack Obama's daughters did not go to public school in Washington, D.C., which spends more than Harvard tuition per each student, but can't get any of them to read. It's not about the money. It's about safety for the kids and an actual curriculum that would teach them. But once again, when these folks are saying, oh, we need to invest in public schools, and they're sending their kids to private schools, it tells you something. It tells you they've given up on our education system, and they're taking care of their own, leaving you to rot.
Yep.
And we need to make sure that we hold these people accountable and say, my kids are just as important as yours. My family is just as important as yours. You don't get to go off into your gated community, safe from illegal immigration, safe from nonsense and crime, and say, I don't get a good police department, a good school, and a safe environment for my family. That double standard has to stop now.
100%.
You said it. Excellent. Words to live by. Words to live by.
Okay, I have a few comments. First, I really appreciate Pastor Leonard. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom tonight. And Deuteronomy is a great place to start. You can definitely go back to Genesis, but Deuteronomy tells us that we should be teaching our kids. We should be teaching our kids when we wake up,
Bingo.
when we sit down, when we lie down. And I always say, if they would just bring the 10 Commandments back, if we could just start with the 10 Commandments, we would probably get the majority of this garbage figured out in the world right now, just by bringing the 10 Commandments back. I mean, think about bringing a Bible into a school right now. You can have pornographic books all day long, but we can't bring a Bible into the school. It's it's ridiculous. And I wanted to make one more point about the whole COVID thing. When John was talking about the Overdose Awareness Month, COVID had, do you guys remember the percentage of survival that COVID had? 99.9% survival rate. And we locked down everything and we did all this extra precaution. Do you know what a fentanyl overdose non-survival rate is? 100% you will die if fentanyl is put on you. 100%. You know what they have to do to you? They have to Narcan you. Narcan right now is out of control in Ohio, and no one's talking about this. So it's extremely important about education. I also just think it's really important for people to understand that just because fentanyl's not touching you right now, or cocaine's not touching you, or a drug's not touching you, doesn't mean that it won't. Because you go walk into an ER room right now, and I can guarantee you most of the nurses in there have been Narcaned against their will.
Terrific.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I think John Pleshnik has a great, his final statements. I mean, I feel like he said it all. But, these folks are not sending their kids to public schools. I think public schools is the lowest form of education. In the meantime, it might take a long time to solve these problems. You need to really parents need to consider homeschooling. Private school, I guess, if both parents work. But homeschool is the way to go. So it might take 4 or 5 years or more to solve this problem. And I don't think we're going to be able to keep the left from just hammering home, you know, you can bring a litter box to public school and think you're a cat tomorrow. And, you know, whatever the teacher might decide. And they're afraid to talk about the Bible. They're afraid to talk about, you know, conservative value. You know, good conservative teachers are afraid to say what they really think about things because they're afraid of getting fired. So homeschool your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, we got time for one more.
Time for one more. All right, good. Quickly. Don't assume private schools are okay. Some of them are just as woke as some of the government schools. It's a double negative. You're paying for the bad stuff.
That's true.
But do your research wherever you send your kids if you're not choosing to home educate. On COVID, always remember to look for the bright side. Remember, COVID cured the flu.
That's right.
Also,
no one got the flu in 2019.
Yeah, like
no
CDC one. Statistics. I mean, I think they went to pretty much statistically zero in 2020, 2019 or whatever. It was like nobody died from the flu. It was just poof, it magically disappeared. And then everybody died with COVID. It was crazy. It's a bad time. If somebody from the government here's an announcement. If you're from the government and you want me to pay attention to COVID, I'll pay attention when the border is closed. The last piece that I'm going to throw in there, the last piece is I hear from administrators, the good ones that get through to us on the tip line, that there is a prevailing sentiment in these well-funded, these snake oil, whatever you want to call it, these government schools. There is a concept that if they do well, it's going to lead to loss of money. We need to tackle that. This concept that the worse they are, the more they can claim they need to have more money. But then we see it all the time, and it's already been brought up on this call. When they do get more money and the levy passes, it goes into nonsense. More administrators, more raises for people, a new building, a newer expanded, unisex bathroom, rebuilding a building or whatever. At the end of the day, real parents don't care what the building looks like or how fast the internet is. If there are schools out there, and there are, that are beating us in education in a mud hut with a chalkboard.
It's amazing. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you. God bless every one of you. A terrific show tonight. I really appreciate everybody's input and stuff. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.